Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we have the refinishing of a free table that my buddy Loper gave to me. Shout out to Loper, thank you sir. This thing was sitting in his own personal antique shop that he had. I'm dating it to the late 70s, early 80s. By definition, I suppose if it were a vehicle, it's an antique. Clearly pretty beat up, looks like an old canning table maybe. Someone might have been a jeweler. I don't really know what all these marks are from, but they're each about an 1/8 inch deep. So I'm going to start off right away with my favorite technique, which is scraping. Obviously, you know, it's a time-consuming process, and it can also be a little physical. But by and large, what this does, again, for people who haven't watched my other videos, is it saves your sanding pad significantly. Now I'm stepping up to my Rotex 150 EQ, which I believe on this I have just the 80 grit on grind mode. Those of you familiar with this tool will know that it is one of the best sanders that's out there in my opinion. It makes quick work of it, and the scraping really helps save on sandpaper. And given supply chain shortages of late, I'd rather replace a 2-inch scraper blade than be short on sandpaper. You can see these nicks in here. Those are about an 1/8 inch in, and on grind mode with this thing, it pulls them out pretty well. And I'm going to feather those edges in so I'm not dishing. This pine is super soft. Getting into the edges here, again, pretty easy. I actually turned it off grind mode. Don't like sanding table edges on grind mode. So now it's time for me to take apart the table so I can paint it. And at this point in time, I'm not really concerned about how much minor scratches or dings and dents I get on the top pre-finish. So I just throw it straight up on my plywood cart. And I'm removing these screws, which look to be kind of a vintage style Craig screw. Pretty straightforward process here, just releasing as much of the hardware as possible so I'm not pulling. I turn my dust collection to a little under half power for my finished passes of sanding. It helps the pigtailing from being too pronounced. And I jump straight into stain. I did not stir it very well, so I come back in here and stir, and every can of stain says not to shake it. I'm not a huge stickler for that. I think with clear coat finish, you should certainly not shake it for bubbling, but with stain, I don't understand why you couldn't. In fact, for those of you who've ever bought a Sherwin-Williams, they put it in their auto shaker for you. So I shake it here. No shame. Once I get through with this process, I'm not trying to make it identical to what it was before, but I'm certainly feeling at this point in time it's a little too golden for kind of what I was shooting for, especially with the paint plan. So I throw another layer on top that's slightly darker, buff it all in, and prepare for a clear coat. Here's the finished product after 2 applications of stain. And again, with tinting, you might not get it a whole lot darker on the second round if it penetrates well the first time. Now for me, if I'm flipping a piece of furniture and trying to make a quick buck, I'm not huge on scuff sanding all the old paint off. I'll clean it really well. Maybe I'll use an etching cleaner to help adhesion of my primer. But I'm going to use a shellac-based primer when I get there. Here's my Minwax hand rub poly, or wipe-on poly. I always use satin, and I always use this brand. I think it's the superior polyurethane for this application. Coat number 1 to seal it all in. And it was really hot in the shop. I think it was about 95 degrees on this particular day, so it started drying very quickly. So not to bore you, I have the table all primed up, and now I'm using Sherwin-Williams Emerald urethane-based paint in color Snowbound with a pretty decent brush. Probably like a $12 2-inch or 3-inch brush. I don't know the particulars on it, but it works well. And this paint goes on incredibly well. If you've ever used it before, it lays out nicely. So it kind of, it reacts with oxygen. It catalyzes kind of, and it lays out very well. So brush marks tend to disappear. It's almost like they've put Floetrol in it for you. Now, on this particular piece, I'm not keen on getting it perfect. It's a vintage piece. It's a farmhouse aesthetic. I'm not worried about brush marks, and I'm really not worried about the nicks and dents. It's character to me. There's no way I'm going to get out of it in the budget what I would have to put into it if I needed all those marks out. And just realigning the table here, getting it all set up. That's an incredible amount of pressure in that beer. And replacing the screws. Now you'll notice I switched direction. I did a 180 so my screw holes wouldn't hit the same ones. I don't want to tear out the meat of the lumber and have these screws start to strip later on as, you know, the table ages if I sell this thing. Putting the knob back on. Could I have put a new piece of hardware on? Yeah, sure. I didn't really care to. And there you have it. The drawer, it's back. And that is the table. It all in all, I think I had probably 3 hours in on this piece of straight working time. The majority of it was sanding and cleaning. The actual application of the stain and paint was relatively easy. I got 4 coats of hand rub poly satin on there, 1 coat of shellac based primer, and 2.5 coats, give or take, of the Sherwin-Williams Emerald urethane paint and color snowbound. That, friends, is the table. Like it, subscribe, hang around for more. Hope y'all are doing well. We will see you next week.